Between 2 million to 11,000 years ago during the Pleistocene, you would have found many weird and wonderful creatures, some of which could be found on the islands of the world. At this point in time there were giant swans in the Mediterranean, hobbits on the islands of Indonesia, and surprisingly, elephants. Well, I say elephants, but these weren't the giants that roam Asia and Africa today, but miniature forms of their distant relatives. This may sound ridiculous to you all, but these creatures would have been a common sight across the world during this time. But why and how did these creatures, whose ancestors were some of the biggest animals on land at the time, become so small? Well, that's why you're here, so let's find out. Remarkably, this has happened not only multiple times, but across multiple genera and in multiple places. On the Channel Islands of California, you had the pygmy mammoths. In the Mediterranean, you had Paleoloxodon falconeri. And across most of Indonesia, dwarf stegodon could be found roaming the jungles of Java, Flores, and Sumbar. This begs the question, why were there so many? Well, it was believed that their shrinking was the result of something known as the island rule. This states that on islands, big things get small and small things get big, but this has since been proven not to be the case, with certain species disproving it. The theory now is that it was in fact a lack of predators and other large herbivores. See, with no competition on the island, these creatures could afford to shed a few pounds and lose a couple of inches, which resulted in them looking slightly different from their descendants. Majority of them possessed what are known as pedomorphic traits, these being physical features that resemble those found in younger growth stages. Specimens from the island of Sicily show a much more rounded skull shape like those seen in the infants of modern day elephants, and certain species possess features in their leg bones that made walking over the steep ground of their islands easier. So we know why these animals got so small, but we also know they descended from much larger relatives. So how does an animal the size of an elephant get to a remote island? It was suggested that perhaps land bridges connected the islands to the mainland, or the islands themselves were once a part of the mainland, but this has now been debunked. This led researchers to suggest that these descendants would have swum to the islands. With powerful legs and a built-in snorkel, elephants do make surprisingly good swimmers, with certain individuals having been found over 16 kilometers from the shore. Fortunately, they wouldn't have to swim that far. During the Pleistocene, the world would have undergone several periods of global cooling. This meant that most of the sea was trapped in polar ice caps, and as a result, the sea levels would have dropped. This meant that the distance to the islands was much more reasonable, and as soon as temperatures began climbing again, animals on the islands would have been trapped there. It turns out that this would have been a common occurrence as well. Evidence on the Channel Islands showed that the pygmy mammoth would have at some point coexisted with its giant ancestor, the Columbian mammoth. Truly, a sight to behold. Sadly today, none of these animals remain, so what happened to them? Well, several theories have been thrown around, however, the most likely is to do with their food. Analysis of the Channel Islands and the island of Java show that they underwent a switch in the type of plants present on the island. This was believed to be the result of a slowly rising global temperature, and as a result of their food slowly disappearing, so too did the mammoths and stegodons. In regards to those on the Mediterranean, not much is known of their disappearance, but despite this, these proboscids still influence our culture to this very day. But that's a story for another time. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed that video, learning all about these dwarf elephant relatives. If you like this video, please consider subscribing, and if you know anyone interested in this wonderful world of ours, share this video around. Until next time, see you guys soon.